Welcome to the podcast of St. Basil the Great in Brecksville, Ohio, with homilies, talks, and interviews relevant to your Catholic life. God bless you and enjoy.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Star of the Sea Studios. And obviously, we're here with the wonderful Cari Regan, who helps run the studios and our podcast sessions. And today we're here for actually a pretty exciting reason, aren't we, Cari?
Yeah, we are. We are going to be discussing Pope Leo's first encyclical, Magnifica Humanitas, on safeguarding the human person in the time of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, and first off, I think I just want to say the word encyclical. I think we throw it around. Encyclical is a level of teaching that the Pope can use on faith and morals that is a pretty significant level. It's not just a kind of a one-off thought or addressing something. It's a real development of teaching on a particular topic. So Pope Leo really in this encyclical wants to talk about the grandeur of being human, but in particular, he's seeing the advent of AI as the catalyst for doing it. So while the whole thing is not actually on AI, it really isn't, that becomes the main setting to talk about what does it mean to be human in the sense of technology and all these different dynamics. And so what we wanted to do for all of you is hopefully many of you want to roll up your sleeves and read it. Most of you here at St. Basil's are very educated, and you certainly could spend time mulling over, applying your mind to this. You may get a little bogged down at times if you don't know theology and things, but it's well worth your read. But for at the least, maybe the podcast helps you think about a few things. And of course, it can lead you to other sources. There's a lot of different great Catholic sources out there, other podcasts, abbreviations, top 10 quotes, synthesis, anything like that can help you dive in, because the Pope wrote this for everyone. He really wrote this to really address everyone to start thinking through, really pressing into what does it mean to be human? Who decides? Especially now where the messaging about what it means to be is so implicit. You know, I'm here on technology, so we're not, let's say, Amish, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're using a podcast and microphones. We have special lighting. I have an iPad in front of me. We're very pro-technology, but there's also, especially younger generations are very aware of this. There can be a danger that technology can define what it means to be human, and that definition leaves some human beings out, kind of causes us to dislike parts of our own experience, and also can really go against Christ and what he revealed by becoming one of us. And so those are some of the major themes.
Yeah, and I think there was a little bit of we kind of knew this was coming. There was maybe a little, I don't think it was necessarily like a leak. I think they purposefully leaked that the Pope was going to be coming out with an encyclical on AI. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to be on AI. Like, that's so crazy. That's so cool. But as you actually begin to read it, like the whole first two sections are really like on what it means to be human, the human dignity, human work. And he spends quite a bit of time going back over what the past popes have taught us. Yeah. And I even think just spending that time in reading that and like understanding fully more and more like what it means to be human is, of course, the best way to set up kind of this discussion on AI. Yeah. And one of the things that he said is he wants to make sure that we remain profoundly human. And I think that was like one of the biggest takeaways for me is like, okay, so in my use of technology, you know, in our use of, you know, like literally in the creation of my job, like, is what we're doing, is how we're using technology as a parish, is how we're using our social media platforms. Is that still helping us to remain profoundly human? Or is it, you know, just kind of creating more noise and, you know, just kind of sucking people in? Like, we want to make sure that like the things that we're producing, the things that we're putting out, the ways we're celebrating life and whatnot at our parish is helping us to remain profoundly human. And using technology as a tool, as in something to assist us, and not saying like, well, you're here and you've seen the picture of our church, so you've been to our church. No. Like, we're profoundly human as people. We're physical beings. Like, we need to be with one another. We've been created for one another in Genesis. And then also, like, we've been created for the Eucharist. The Eucharist doesn't exist outside of Mass, so we have to be in person.
Yeah. Great. Yeah.
And be profoundly human there too.
Great points. Yeah. And I think the phrase profoundly human would be a real good phrase just to meditate on slowly, that what makes me human? And one of the things we're surprised, especially in our area, to find out is really our bodies are a key point of it. In particular, Cari, as you're saying this, I'm just thinking about you have a very special body right now because you're pregnant. Mm-hmm. You're with child. And so just what that means for a woman and your body as a mom and all the things that's amazing that your body can do for the sake of human life. And it's well, that's not as efficient, your body, as it was, let's say, 10 years ago.
Or a couple months ago.
Okay, or a couple months ago. I'm not allowed to say these things.
Okay.
We're being videotaped, okay?
I said it.
But like that, but also in the sense of things are slower for you, and I know you've told me you're more tired at times, of course, as you're caring for body. But then that's never as fast as AI. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about mom, all the women I know, they'd say, I have baby brain, sorry. Where you just can't recall things. AI will never have that problem.
No.
So is AI better than a mom?
Yeah.
These are the kind of question we want to press into. It's if we just go all with AI or all with technology that's efficient, productive, doesn't need maternity leave, doesn't need a nap, isn't having morning sickness, well, then what wives and moms and women do and can do is seen as less. That's not the real work. AI is getting the real work done. It's well, wait a minute. We're creating a world then that is not profoundly human.
Well, and who said no technology can ever replace the feeling of a hug? Was that Leo or was that Francis?
I think that was me.
Was that you?
No, I'm just kidding. I think it was Pope Leo. He said, it can never take the place of a hug and embrace, et cetera. Yeah.
Very beginning of his pontificate, which definitely set up for us
totally.
This is something he cares about. And I mean, that's an important thing to point out too, that, the Pope that's writing this, and we've had many conversations about this earlier, but, even we were wondering, what language is he writing this in? And the read of it, in my opinion, and yes, I have a theology background, but I honestly have struggled to get through encyclicals recently because I'm this is just not practical.
Sure.
In my opinion, some of them, it's just very beautiful, very wonderful. I'm so glad the Pope is saying this. I can't read any more of it. This I felt was so much easier to read. Maybe because there's a sense of practicality to it because I'm very interested in it. Sure. But also, as you were kind of noted, he's American. So he kind of writes and thinks similar to us, even though he spent a lot of time in Peru.
Totally.
But knowing that, and also knowing that he is younger, he's 60 something, right?
I think he's younger than our bishop even, or maybe right around the same age.
And he knows what it's like to have a cell phone. He has a cell phone. He has an Apple Watch. He lives in and through and with this time of technology. He's not Pope Francis and Pope Benedict, they had their Twitter accounts, they got an Instagram account, but how much of it was them really crafting and creating versus being oh no, I'm very aware of the importance of this and understanding what it means in my daily life too. He definitely calls his brother, but he might FaceTime his brother. And what is that difference? And how does that kind of shape some of these things of technology is good, that allows me to be human. And because he's been with it, he gets it in ways really that does. Others don't. And
just as a pastor, at the end of the day, he really is still a pastor, you can tell. And so, maybe to jump in a little bit before we break down, because what we want to do is talk a little about the table of contents, because it can give you a flow of the encyclical. So what are the titles? What are the topics he's really hitting? Then we're just going to highlight some passages that really spoke to us. And hopefully, like I said, this will move you to want to search it out. You can just search it on your favorite internet search, or you can order it online, get a paper copy and underline and highlight, however you may best learn. But, Pope Leo the 14th is following his hero in many ways, Pope Leo the 13th. And Pope Leo the 13th wrote Rerum Novarum, which was, and this is the anniversary. When he wrote this document, it was on the anniversary of Rerum Novarum. And Rerum Novarum means on new things. Now, on the new things at the late 19th century was not AI, but what he had really done is he inaugurated the church engaging with the social gospel, is what we call it now, or social justice, you may hear it called, or things like that. But really the idea was the love of neighbor component of Christ's teaching is, what does it look like for dynamics of factory workers back then? With the advent of the factory, there became a real clear split of a upper class, middle class, lower class. The conditions of workers in the factories was subhuman. So the church really began to pioneer and champion workers' rights. And what does that mean? And it began to evolve from there, what was called social encyclicals, where almost every pope since then wrote encyclicals to deal with some of the social questions of our day and what is just and fair. How do we honor and love another person made in the image of likeness of God? What are my responsibilities? What are your rights? How does this shape things? So this encyclical flows from that tradition and is in honor of the very first one, Rerum Novarum, to honor his namesake, Pope Leo XIII, our own Pope Leo XIV, really wrote this to say, the new thing of our era is AI. And that's kind of where this encyclical flows from, is some of the high things we were talking about there with being human, profoundly human, some of his own background, and then the great tradition in which this encyclical comes from is part of the great social encyclicals. And he actually spends a lot of time talking about the social doctrine of the church. So I'm just going to name the chapter titles real quick. All right. So there begins what's called a dynamic approach faithful to the gospel, flowing from a little biblical commentary on the Tower of Babel. He then talks about how the church engages with human sciences. What he's trying to show there very clearly is just that the church doesn't recoil, nor does the church try to dominate, but rather we're looking for a mutual dialogue and discernment, that by the gift of the church's teachings from Christ and the Holy Spirit, we bring things to bear on the human condition that no social science does. However, social sciences are experts in different fields, and we want to listen and learn to create that fruitful dialogue where no one would say the church has nothing to offer. We think we know how to be human in God's plan. We really want to fight for that. However, in a particular domain, we're not the experts in AI or in brain science or these type of things. So we want to learn, what do you really mean by your terms? What is this accomplishing? How do you carry it out? Who's doing it? We want to have that fruitful dialogue. That's that first section. Like I said, I'm just going to go through these quickly. Second one, foundations and principles of the social doctrine of the church. This is where he talks about, like you said, the dignity of being human, made in the image and likeness, not just of any God, but the Trinitarian God, relationships. Then he goes through the social doctrine. And while these are buzz terms, they really are rich in the church's tradition. Common good, universal destination of goods, subsidiarity, solidarity, and social justice. And so that's that whole section there. Section 3 is where we get the whole encyclical, really, what everyone's talking about. It's called Technology and Dominance. The grandeur of humanity in light of the promises of AI. This is where you get some of the most poignant statements about AI, about human capacity, human dignity. And if AI is promising certain potentiality, what does that mean for us as being human? And he looks at that very honestly and straightforward. I think he raises some beautiful appeals for us to stay grounded. I know you and I have some quotes in that area. Chapter 4 is safeguarding humanity at a time of transformation, truth, work, freedom. And so he's talking about how do we protect humanity in the notion of the common good, in the notion of the work, and the idea of freedom. And so he looks at these three major concepts. Chapter 5 is the culture of power and the civilization of love. He sees the heart behind technology as one of power, redefining, claiming dominance, getting rid of certain things, establishing others. And he sees the church as a call to the civilization of love. How do I do what's best for my neighbor, even if I have to sacrifice? And he looks at that, those lenses, these two kind of competing, power and love. And then finally, the conclusion is a real reflection on the idea that God became flesh. He took on a body, and we are called to become the one body of different cultures, different languages, different experiences, different talents and skills, but all called to join the body of Christ, the church. So that's kind of the flow of the whole encyclical. So you're going to have some of the topics. First off, if some of those interest you more than others, you can go to the Vatican website and click and just read that section. Be worthwhile to just pray with and see. Some of these imagery he uses are easy to pray with. It moves the heart. But we want to kind of press into some of the more important things or things that stood out to us. So I'm going to kick it back to you, Cari, to kind of unpack a few things.
Yeah, I think that if you just kind of want to get a little bit of a taste of Pope Leo, especially, and, like maybe you're like, oh, I like kind of want to know a little bit about the AI stuff, but like I'm not really all that familiar with it. But I also want to hear the heart of our shepherd and kind of get to know him a little bit. I would even just say reading the very beginning, reading the introduction, will really tell you a lot. It's 16 paragraphs, so it's not too long. Printed out, it's about 3 pages, so that you have an idea of what it is. But he really kind of sets up this beautiful like teaching on the Tower of Babel versus in the book of Nehemiah as they rebuild the city of Jerusalem. And I thought that that was just like a really wonderful way to start, because it really kind of just felt like Father, he is a priest, he's a pope, but it felt like Father Leo sitting us down and being like, I'm going to break open these scriptures for you and kind of like set us up to begin to start. Like, it feels more like a homily of like I'm just going to go ahead and like read through this, guide you through it. And then beyond that, we're going to go into a lot more of the nitty gritty. So I think in really understanding his heart, reading that part really was like kind of my favorite. It
really, and it was right at the outset too, right? And so, the Second Vatican Council, and echoing with all the other councils and church teachings in the tradition, was really put an emphasis that we need to root our teachings in the Bible more. Not because we never did. Of course, we all throughout the medieval times, the church fathers always did. But in practice, we had kind of gotten away from it a little bit in the church. And so he's just really modeling for us really good imagery of saying, let's keep our teachings showing how it's rooted in the scriptures. And so in the Tower of Babel, he sees the image of a rigid uniformity, getting control that everyone be the same language, the same project, the same idea, and we're going to build up to God. So it's this idea of like this self-made man, defining ourselves, and everyone has to agree on the same project. No multiplicity of language, no idea that, the other could be different and enrich my life. It's, if you're not on board, you're out. And so he sees the danger of the Tower of Babel of an exclusion, that who gets to decide who's in and out? Not God and his commandments and his way of life and his mercy and richness, not simply by the way of our creation with insight of justice and truth. No. It's us and our projects. We get to decide who's on board, who's out. And not only do you have to be on board, you have to do it the way we say we want you to do it. And so Tower of Babel represents this real exclusive way of approaching life, which he sees technology doing. That if you're not on board with AI and everything, you're out. And he wants to warn that that's one mindset. And like you said, he brings out this other mindset of this rebuilding of the temple. And what he highlights there is there was prayer and fasting first. So to rebuild the temple, first we're going to go before God, we're going to empty ourselves with fasting, and we're going to really bring our desires and hopes to the Lord and ask him to inspire us. Then the prophet, what does the prophet do? Then the prophet goes and listens to the refugees, the people who had been cast out but are now coming back to Jerusalem, begins to listen to their stories, their needs, their talents, their hopes, their dreams, and begins to use all of their different abilities to rebuild together as a complementarity of giftings, as we're different, but we can work together, grounded in God and for the God's glory. But I can welcome your gifts, your different ways, your different hopes, and we can find space to work together, not to do just anything. We're still trying to do God's plan. There's still the idea that we're trying to reach what is true and good, but we can do it together as different, but still complementary. And that's kind of how he maps out the very beginning of this, that there's a way of imploring technology to be a part of the huge human project that God set up. And there's a way of also doing it where it becomes the goal. And I think you have a quote or some quotes that can help ground that.
Well, and he says at the very end of this first section, with the heart of the shepherd and a father, I ask everyone to abandon the construction of yet another Tower of Babel and join forces in building up the common good so that humanity will never lose its beauty and the world will once again come to recognize the human heart as the place where God desires to dwell. And just like thinking through that he is even using the language of like, I'm the heart of your shepherd here. Like this, hear me out. This is my thesis statement, that I do not want to build a Tower of Babel together, but I want to recognize the beauty in this world and in especially every human heart where God is dwelling.
Yeah, it's so rich. And to start the encyclical there, they're going to say, what makes humanity magnificent is really that God created us and wants us, and that he desires to dwell deep within us. And that's for everyone. The person you're most mad about in your life, the person who you love most in your life, the person you've never even thought about in your life, everyone. And that's where he begins the whole encyclical. Is really, really beautiful. I think what we want to go to now is just the idea of the human dignity. Chapter 2. Chapter 1, like I said, he talks about the church and the dialogue. But then chapter 2, he begins just with the importance of the social doctrine being grounded in the goodness of the human person. In paragraph 48, he says, the church's social doctrine brings us to the very heart of our faith. So this is interesting. The church's social doctrine, the heart of our faith, is the social doctrine brings us there. And what is the heart of our faith? The mystery of the living God revealed in Jesus, who as a communion of persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, is love itself in relationship, expressed in the mutual gift of self and in sharing with the world. And I think it's amazing that the heart of our faith, which the social doctrine leads to, is the revelation of Jesus. That the heart of our social doctrine is not some sort of political party. It's not some sort of philosophical strategy. It's not some sort of military conquest. It's not some sort of charity event, but rather it's a divine activity. It's the revelation of God in the face of Jesus, showing us that God is a communion of persons, and that pours into the world and through the Holy Spirit into the church and out into the world to honor and elevate every man and woman. That's the dignity of being human, is we're made in the image of God for love, to be loved, and to love excellently other people.
And as he continues on and continues talking about the equal dignity of all human beings in paragraph 51, keeping that in mind and in heart that Jesus is the center of it all, he says, I consider particularly insidious the one who suggests that every person must earn or justify his or her own worth, to the point of attributing greater value to those who are more efficient and effective. Like kind of pointing out the fact of like, it is not because you are, and actually this is something that, I've taken to heart and been learning for years as a recovering honors student. Like I put so much for so long in like, well, I have straight A's, therefore I am good. And in kind of breaking that down, and like I remember there was a point in the middle of college where I was like, who ever let me study theology? Like, am I studying it and getting good grades and like doing awesome and like, not to brag, but was I outstanding senior in theology? Yes. But like I have the mental capability to be X, Y, or Z. How am I studying theology? But to understand, like, this is like the Lord very carefully saying, like, no. Like, it is not in your grades. It's not in what you produce. It's not in what you do. It's just simply in who you are. Yeah. That you are made, you have a heart where God dwells. And so, I mean, I think that even just some of the language, the thing that most jumped out to me was, him saying, I consider this particularly insidious. Like that was like, this is a big word. This is a really rough word. Like I better pay attention to what he's saying. Yeah. Like no one is, important based on what they produce, but who they are. And because things become more efficient, more effective, that people can do things better, it doesn't diminish their inherent dignity and worth as a person.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing. Later on in this encyclical, of course, I don't have it right in front of me, but he talks about the different kinds of dignity, that there's a moral dignity, there's a working dignity, but he says the kind of dignity he wants to uphold is the ontological dignity. And that's a fancy philosophical word that just means, like you said, because you have worth.
Yes.
It's that you exist that makes you meaningful and interesting and a gift. It's not what you do. It's that you are. And he will quote Pope Benedict several times in this, saying, each person is an intentional thought of God, willed by God, and loved by God. And I like the idea that each of us is an intentional thought. I go back to like when I was sick and growing up, I would watch Bob Ross on TV, the famous painter with the big afro and everything. And like he would be so intentional with every painting. I'm going to do a happy little tree, or let's get a little waterfall. And it's like that intentionality, God actually was infinitely more intentional about a Cari, about Orion. Like my dignity is not that I'm Father Ryan. My dignity is that I exist. And it's like, I think that's a prayer point for all of us, is to say, can I start with myself? And if I can't welcome that truth or live out of that truth or for myself, why not? And that's a good reflection for ourselves. Because if I can't live out of myself, surely can't bless you with it to say, I think you're good just because you exist. It's like, but I don't believe it about me. It's like, well, now wait a minute. And so I think this is a great place in this encyclical to pause for us, is to say that, okay, we know that the biblical story, he begins with a little spiritual guidance, and now he roots everything in the dignity of your uniqueness and mine, that's where this is so important. God wanted there to be a Cari in the world at this time.
Yes.
And that's what makes it so important. And I think I want to end, you have a quote by St. Carlos Acutis, do you not?
Yes.
I'd like to end with our first session on that, because then we're going to come back for another part to go a little bit deeper into the AI and some of the practicals. But this first section was big level, letting you know about it, biblical story, human dignity, and we're going to kind of land the plane in this first section with this quote, and then we'll do part 2.
Yes. And as I was reading this, the thing that was coming to mind the most in this whole part that we've just talked about is the quote from St. Carlo Acutis, where he says, all of us are born as originals, but so many of us die as photocopies. And to kind of continue to like break that open of what St. Carlo is saying, and to understand like we are created unique, we are created different, and we don't need to be all the same in this Tower of Babel, but we are meant to use our gifts, our creativity, our critical thinking, to bless the world with. And there are things that, AI can do real fast, but there are things that AI will never think to do because it just simply doesn't have the mind of Cari, the mind of Ryan, the mind of whoever you are listening to this. In this age of AI, that's kind of, I think, one of the just most brilliant, prevalent things to consider as we discern using AI, and kind of understanding to make sure, like, is my use of AI just making me a photocopy of everything else? Or am I using some of my human creativity and understanding the goodness of AI, the great uses of it, and not just producing the same thing as every other person can use on AI?
Yeah, I love that image, to not die as a photocopy. And you see that in the saints. They die as very singular people, very unique. And so we're going to pause there to end the first part of this conversation on the encyclical, and we'll come back with the second part. We'll dive a little bit more into his comments specifically around AI and what makes us human, all those things, and some of the practical things flowing from that, both here at the parish and what you can consider at home. So thanks for listening, and we hope to hear you, or hope you hear us, in part 2. God bless.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast from our parish. If something touched your heart, we encourage you to take it to prayer. To be notified of future podcasts, please hit that subscribe button and feel free to share this podcast with a friend. We would love to keep in touch. You can find us at basilthegreat.org. Until next time, St. Basil the Great, pray for us.